Hey, this is Brent Allen Winters, commonlawyer.com, www.commonlawyer.com, coming at you from the remote hinterlands of the Wabash River Valley, where the hogs, the frogs, and the dogs keep up a racket all night long. We will dive into first the Catechism on the Constitution of the United States. Well, the true law comes in two volumes. Volume number 1, our Declaration of 76, calls the laws of nature. That's our common law tradition. The way things are in creation, and they're not going to change. The way things are, you can see it in creation around you. You can see it in your relationships between men and men, men and things, men and animals, animals and animals. The way God made creation, the laws that he put in motion, they ain't going to change. He won't change them. He said he won't. He'll suspend them. He has suspended them once in a while. That's called a miracle. He has done that. But that's not his primary MO. But he never changes them, even if he suspends them. He doesn't change them. And he does it for his specific purposes at specific times. And it's hardly ever what somebody thinks it is. But these laws don't change. That the laws of nature are common law tradition. The second volume of that tradition is the laws of nature's God. The laws of nature and the laws of nature's God, quoting again from our Declaration of 76. What's the laws of nature's God? That's the Bible. God's expression of his will, his law, written. And by the way, that book called the Bible is the court of last resort, period. End of sentence, end of paragraph. No, don't come to me talking about some priest told you something, or some pope, or some patriarch, or some professor, or some other dinky doctor or punky professor. No, this is final. This is final. Court of last resort. This is a paper pope recorded on paper. It's final. And if it isn't final in your mind, you're deceived of doctrines of demons. So let's get straight to the rawness of what the laws of nature and the laws of nature's God say, and quit fiddling around with superfluous BS, bottom sentiment. I think we're ready for question 205 of Arthur J. Stansbury's Catechism on the Constitution of the United States, a significant slice of our common law tradition as applied to government. Questions and answers. Catechism, questions and answers. Question 205. Here it is. Suppose the President of the United States should die, or should be put out of office, or should resign his office, or should from any cause be unable to do the duties which belong to it. What is to be done? Answer. His duties must then be performed by the Vice President of the United States. That's why he's there. Vice. That means in place of, like the other Latin word vicar means in place of. Well, let's say that he dies in office. Wasn't it President Tyler that died in office? He did, yeah. President Lincoln died in office, different causes. Jack Kennedy died in office. There have been some others die in office. Well, what happened in that case? Well, then the vice president, is he sworn in as quick as they can swear his carcass in, and he performed the duties of the president. If he dies, some of us have seen that happen. Well, what if he's put out of office? How do you put a man out of office? You impeach him. Or somebody kidnaps him. Who knows? They just put him out of office by impeachment. I've watched that in my lifetime twice. Twice? Yeah. An attempt to put a president out of office by impeachment. Bill Clinton was impeached. That means brought to trial. Help bound over, impeach, means to bind by the hold by the foot, catch a man by the toe, hold him. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo, catch a president by the toe. If he hollers, make him pay $50 every day. Remember that? Well, that's impeachment, means to catch by the toe, to grab by the foot, to snare the foot or the toe. That's a Latin word, impeachment, and that's what happens when you impeach a president. You catch him by the foot and you hold him till the U.S. Senate can try him for high crimes and misdemeanors. That's happened twice. I remember Bill Clinton. Well, they threatened to impeach Dick Nixon, 1974. I remember that. He beat him to the punch. What'd he do? He resigned. He didn't want to be the only president in the history of the country to be impeached. They tried to impeach Andrew Johnson. Andrew Johnson was vice president. Abe Lincoln got a pistol ball in the back of his head and died. Remember that fella shot him? John Wilkes Booth, working for the Pope of Rome. Strong evidence of that. Claimed he was working for the Confederacy. Whatever. Shot him. So Andrew Johnson from Tennessee, by the way, Tennessee never went with the Confederacy completely. It was very much of a mixed bag. He was from there. Well, Lincoln was from the South too. Family was from Virginia, and he was born in Kentucky, which was part of Virginia at that time. Well, it had been. They made a state out of it. Well, Andrew Johnson became president when Abe Lincoln died. Across the road from Ford's Theater, that's where he died, in a bed over there. Well, Johnson he was a vice president, he became president. And because he was sympathetic to the plight of the southern states because of the devastation, the scorched earth policy of the Union Army, he decided to go easy on them, let them relax for a spell, gain their wits, get things back to normalcy if he could. And plus, he was a Southerner. The religious existentialists, the demon worshipers in the Northeast that wanted the war, they whipped people up, and we got to impeach this guy. He's being nice to the Confederates. He's being merciful. We don't want any mercy here. Good grief, can't have that. So they impeached him in the U.S. House, and his impeachment failed by one measly vote. One measly vote. And then there were no impeachments until Slick Willie, Bill Clinton. We used to call him Slick Willie back then. He got impeached, and I think he squeaked by with one vote to spare too, so he didn't get bound over for trial. Didn't DJ Trump get impeached too? I think that's true. So many crazy things have happened now. That seems mild, Miss Francine. Oh, you tried to impeach DJ Trump? That doesn't amount to a pinch of dried owl droppings at this point. after you try to put a bullet through his head a couple of times and graze his ear, lucky he's got his ear. You know, an ear, if they hit the cartilage, I think they did, that'll never heal. Cartilage doesn't heal. I know. I got one ear crookeder than the other. What a weird accident that was. Well, busted the cartilage, you see. And they tried to impeach him. Well, but the point is, if a president gets impeached, then the vice president, that's why we always want to have a vice president standing there to step into his place. Well, we've had that happen. What if he should resign his office? What if the president of the United States says, I don't want to be president anymore, I'm quitting, here's my resignation letter? Then who becomes president? The vice president. Have we had anybody resign from office? Yeah. Richard Nixon, president of the United States from 1968 to 1974. He presided over the removal of American troops from Vietnam. Got blamed for the whole war. President Jack Kennedy, yeah, they called him Jack back then. Hatless Jack, that's what they called him. He never wore a hat. Why? Thought he'd mess up his hair, I guess. Started a fad in America where men didn't wear hats anymore. That's the only thing that President Kennedy did that was of great note, really. He talked a good line, never did anything. Oh, he was busy. Oh, he did a lot of things. He bedding girls. He did a lot of that. That was his. That was mainly what he wanted. He had money, so all he wanted after that was girls. Boy, did he have them! If you haven't gone back and read, just to make you realize that these fellows aren't angels. Did he talk a good line? Oh yeah, and it scared people because if he'd ever done what he was saying, it would have done a lot to the evil empire. But the truth is, listen to me, friends, he had that Harvard accent because his pappy sent him to Harvard, had enough money, had that Harvard accent, and he could talk the talk of politics. He was a talker, but he did absolutely nothing. How could you? About got us into a nuclear war with Russia. He did that. I mean, even Harry Truman said, man, if we don't get rid of this guy, he's going to have the whole country blown up. You know, they sent Harry Truman as a delegate. He had been president, as you know, presided over some of World War II, the Indian, the Korean conflict. And then they wanted him in 1960 to be a delegate to the Democratic Convention to choose the president. I mean, it's the president of Harry Truman, president of the United States. They wanted him to be a delegate to the presidential nominating convention for the 1960 election, 1960 convention. He was all set to go, and he got there, and he looked around. This is the president again. Looked around, of course, he was privy to what was going on. And he quit. And he had a press conference telling why. And he said he wasn't going to be a part of choosing a candidate for president where the choice was made before any of the delegates had a chance to really have any influence at all, including him. And he wasn't for any father buying his son's way into the presidency and not allowing the convention to choose. And that's what happened with Kennedy. We're just fortunate we dodged a bullet of a nuclear war when he was in office. He didn't know what he was doing. He was too young. He was too interested in girls. He couldn't give attention. Am I down on him? Absolutely. Well, God preserved us, and God uses all sorts of people to get done what he wants. But he was dangerous, too young, ignorant, rich, overly rich. His father made 2 fortunes in government. I mean, fortunes that doesn't look like they're going to go away. It's that much money. Hatless Jack. So people haven't worn hats to church since the middle 60s because of Kennedy. That's the most significant thing that happened really during his presidency. I remember Truman said that whole debacle with Cuba, that happened during Kennedy's administration. And he had a lot to say about that too. And if you haven't read it really is Truman's book, but it was an interview, a big thick book about yay thick, called Plain Speaking with Harry Truman. If you like to understand better what happened back then, just ask him, because Harry wasn't one to pull any punches. He was never one to not tell the whole story, the good with the bad. I mean, he had real problems too, but we knew about him. He didn't try to hide them. That's the truth. You know, he was good friends with one of the biggest mob bosses in the country. His name was Pendergast. Matter of fact, Pendergast is the one that was responsible for his entire political career. And he was the man in Kansas City, and as I said in Kansas City, like it was said back home in Terre Haute of Tony Holman, you didn't spit on the sidewalk in Kansas City without getting permission from Pendergast. He was just a straight up thug, ran the town, the unions, the illegal liquor, the prostitution, the whole caboodle. Well, he's the one that started Harry Truman out on his political career and at the county level and took him all the way to the presidency of the United States. Without Pendergast, Truman would have never been president, ever. Well, when Pendergast decided to cash in his checks and get scooped, Harry wanted to go to his funeral. Harry was president, and he went to his funeral. And that, by the way, because he went to Pendergast's funeral, it looks like very much the reason why he didn't win the election for president when he ran against, who was it? Or he knew he couldn't win. Truman got the 1960, 52, the 52 election. Again, Dwight David Eisenhower. He got so much flack in the newspapers for attending that funeral service, and he said, well, now listen, I've known this guy all my life, and he obviously isn't a Sunday school material, but I'm not going for him. I'm going for his family, his wife, his children. Well, that didn't help. See, when you're in politics, you can't just get away with doing anything you want. They'll rip you to shreds, and they did him, but he wasn't going to change. So my point is, when it comes to Truman, especially when he got up in his 80s, when that book was written, you read what Truman said, he'll give you the straight story. That's the advantage of Harry Truman. And he knew better. I mean, if he wanted to preserve his political career, he knew that it would hurt. He knew that it would hurt, but he wasn't. He stuck by his friends, I'll say that for him. Poor Harry. You know, I ate breakfast when I was growing up, true story. Well, after I was about 14 or 15, I ate breakfast every morning before I left home at the table where Harry Truman and Bess, his wife Bess, ate breakfast. Once in the little town where I went to high school, the Cumberland Road runs through there from Terre Haute. And back then, when you were no longer president, you just packed your bags, got in your Plymouth, and drove home. And that was the end of that. No Secret Service protection, no pension. You just went home. And so Harry and Bess got in the car in 1952 or 53, it'd been 53, and they started driving home from D.C., and they got on the Cumberland Road, which was the main road going east and west, no interstates. But that Cumberland Road is a nice road. That was the first interstate road, federally funded interstate road in America, very old, going back to the early 1800s. Well, they drove home back to Missouri, and they passed right through that little town. And they had, like most little towns, it had a hotel. And the name of the hotel was the Hotel Delight. It was right beside the Lyric Theater. Every little town, little towns had theater, and they had a little hotel. And of course, on the Cumberland Road, that was a highly traveled road, even though that was a little town. it had one stop sign. Now, they did put a stoplight in later. Had stoplight. They got a stoplight still yet today. Where two state, well, the Cumberland Road and State Highway cross there. And they stayed in that hotel, got up the next morning. That hotel, they got up the next morning and went downstairs and ate breakfast. Of course, the guy that owned the place said, shoot. He said, if Harry Truman ate breakfast with Bess at this table, I'm going to put this table in the nicest place and charge a little extra if somebody wants to eat breakfast at this table, because this is where Harry and Bess stopped and stayed the night and ate breakfast. Well, when the Hotel Delight went out of business, old Delno 90 and my buddy Jay and some other cousins, they got hired to carry the furniture out in front. And my uncle John Will Henry, he was the auctioneer along with, shucks, what was his partner's name? John was a Democrat. My uncle was a Democrat. And that was from mom's side of the family. And his partner was a Republican. When I ran for office, he did auctions for me, his partner. They were good auctioneers. And it was just fun to go listen to them call their cadence and sing their tune, you know. Well, they had that Hotel Delight and they took everything out, including that table. And my mother went into town and she bid on that table. And I don't know how she pulled it off, but she has a solid oak table, you see. It was round, about yay big around. And then you could pull it apart, you know, and had that leaf you could put in it and make a bigger, solid, thick oak. And so Mom brought that home and in the kitchen, and we ate breakfast where Harry and Bess sat and ate breakfast. Yeah. I thought you might be impressed with that. I suppose it doesn't make me any smarter, but it was fun to think about. Carl Honnold, that was the name of that other auctioneer with Uncle John Will. Yeah. Boy, they could get things rolling at an auction. Well, they had that stuff out front and they were auctioning it off. And along with it, they had rope made of manila about that big around and about that far apart. They had giant knots in this rope. And they had a lot of them out there for sale. And Mom got one of those big ropes. And that was the fire escape in the second story of the hotel. They had a big rope. I'd been up in there when I looked at it before the sale started because I knew Uncle John, see, he'd let me go in and look at things. He'd kind of have a pre-look, see if there's anything he wanted. Well, they had that big rope, and they had every room by the window, they had a rope, that big rope, a rope like that, attached to the wall, secured tightly, and it was flayed out nice and pretty. And in case of a fire, you throw the rope out the window and you climb down the rope. That's the way they used to do it. And that, well, it used to, yeah, back when I was young, that's the way that was. That hotel and that dining area in that hotel was a gathering place there in town. Well, Mom got that rope too. And we got that rope at home, and my brother and I climbed up the maple tree beside the house, had an old maple there. And we attached that, hang down from the strong limb on that maple tree. And then I don't know where we got it. We got a bunch of sawdust and put under it in case we fell. Might reduce the possibility of breaking our bones or our neck or something. We get that thing swinging. And I learned how to pole vault using that rope. I know that sounds funny, but the key to pole vaulting is to be totally relaxed and trust your pole. If you can't trust your pole and just totally confident of it, you can't relax and think of all the other things you got to do. And so I'd get that rope and I'd run with it and I'd turn myself upside down and climb it. That's what you have to do when you're pole vault. Get your feet up above your head when you go over the bar, you know. And I didn't have a coach to tell me how to do that. I just started thinking about how would I do it, and that's how I did it. Well, that was Harry Truman. He became president. See, Roosevelt died in office. He died. Well, then who becomes president? The vice president. And that was Harry Truman. He became president. Well, and then Dick Nixon resigned in 1974, where they were cocked and loaded to impeach him and throw him out of office, and it probably would happen. So he resigned. Well, who became president? Gerald Ford. Gerald Ford was vice president. Gerald Ford is the one that stood the watch as president during the final days of our involvement in Vietnam and the Mayaguez incident, where the Cambodians, in an act of piracy, stole an American merchant ship under an American flag, hijacked the crew, the cargo, the whole caboodle. And Ford's the one that sent the Marines in and the Naval Air Force, the fighter jets, to dismantle their military installations. And he told them, we're going to dismantle your military installations if you don't give that thing back within 2 hours. They didn't. He said, we're going to dismantle your military installations. And he added, and that doesn't mean with screwdrivers and wrenches. Well, when we got through with them, Alpha strikes from the USS Coral Sea, there wasn't any military installations left in Cambodia. None. You don't want to do something like that unless it's advisable. Think it over, but they did. It was right within days of the evacuation of Saigon. All that went together. Well, that's what the vice president's supposed to do. Then 206 question. But suppose the same thing should have happened to the vice president also. In other words, the vice president dies or resigns or gets sick. Oh, I forgot to add. What if a president just gets unable to handle the office? Let's say he has a stroke or something, and his brain doesn't look like his brain's working that good anymore. Like, oh, we've had that happen. Didn't we have that just happen? Biden was not mentally capable to be president of the United States. I don't know that he ever was, but it got worse. What I mean to say is the light was on, but nobody was home. The brain was abandoned. It was obvious, and the Democrats would not say it. They're saying it now, but it's too obvious. What are you going to do? Some things become so obvious politically. That's the object of politics, is to make things obvious. Make them simple. Well, they did that. They abandoned, his brain was abandoned. He was unable. Woodrow Wilson, President of the United States. I think it was about a year and a half. His brain didn't work the last year and a half he was in office. His wife, Mrs. Wilson, ran the White House, sacked cabinet members, forged legislation, forged her husband's signature. Yeah, all that's true. It should have not happened. It was shrouded in secrecy. The Democrats hid it all. Hid it. Just like they tried to do with Joe Biden. Deny it and say, oh, everything's all right. People are saying, well, where is he? We don't see him anywhere. We haven't seen him in months. Is he okay? Oh, yeah, he's okay. He just figures at this point he doesn't have to be out in public that much. Isn't that what they said about Joe Biden? Oh, yeah, he's okay. He doesn't show up. He campaigns for president. Not at all. They said, well, he's campaigning from his basement back at his house. He wasn't doing nothing. Why? They wanted to keep him out of public eye, because the Democrats would lose control of the White House. They didn't care about Biden. He was just, as long as they keep him alive, they didn't care if his brain functioned. Oh, yeah, he's president. See, that's how desperate they are, friends. That's why the Bible says, resist evil, resist the evil one. He's a paper tiger. Like Mao Zedong said about the United States. Oh, the United States is nothing but a paper tiger. Really? I don't know. Wishful thinking, but that's the kind of wishful thinking that brings war. What did Japan say? Oh, those Americans, all they do is watch movies and drive Plymouths and Fords and Chevys around. They all got money. Even during the Depression, they were saying that they have no discipline. Their military is gutted. They're not warriors like us. We're the warrior class. We'll whoop them 17 ways from Sunday. Just give us a shot. Well, that was stupid. That's what they say, and that's the way it becomes. If you got a man like that in office, get rid of him, because the rest of the world will see that as an opportunity to attack, and they will. Oh, ding dong's in office, we can do anything we want. So they said about King John, Prince of France. King John, the king that was king of England, that it was because of him that they pushed forward Magna Carta. King John and his brother Richard was supposed to be king, and he left on a crazy wild goose chase called a crusade to Jerusalem. Dumbest stuff. That was a banker's ploy. It made a lot of money too. Had several of those crusades, enslaved children, all enslaved young girls. Rome was promoting the idea so they could enslave people and also get a lot of money through the Knights Templar. Had it all figured out how they could get paid to make sure all the armies got safe to Jerusalem. Well, at any rate, Richard was supposed to be king, but he took off, so that left John. John didn't know his backside from a $70 sunbonnet. So he lost all of the land in France that England had. It was part of England. It was all the coast of Normandy, all that, and going about a third of the way into France. Lost all that. Lost the loyalty of all the landholders in England. What was he doing? Well, he liked girls like Bill Clinton and Jack Kennedy. He just liked girls, and that's all he had on his mind was sex and booze. I'll catch up with you sooner or later. It doesn't work. You think you can pull it off when you're young. It's not possible. Well, he lost all the land. He was unable to be king. And he was posed to go to war with the landholders of England. And he had the French, he had the Pope behind him, and the Pope's armies and the French, they were getting ready to invade England. If it wouldn't have been for somebody else who was effectively the vice king, as it were, that's what they lacked, you see. They lacked having a man ready to step into office when the ding dong that's in there either dies or resigns or gets impeached or thrown or whatever. And that caused a problem. Well, it wasn't for a fellow named Marshall. What a patriot that guy was. He held it together. Well, we don't want that to happen here. We don't want the president to not have somebody standing in place. Question 207. No, question 206. Suppose the vice president resigns, gets sick, can't function, gets dementia, whatever. Then what happens? Answer. Then the Congress must declare by law who shall perform the duties till another president is chosen or till the president is again able to perform them himself. Ronnie Reagan got shot. Oh, they plugged him with a 22 caliber, I think it was a 22 caliber automatic pistol. The idea was to kill him, of course. The bankers. He was talking conservative, boy. Woo! Ronnie Reagan, he wanted to get rid of the income tax and pornography and a whole bunch of stuff. He had the commission on pornography to study the problem before they acted, the commission, and deliver a report to have support for legislation to get rid of pornography, to get rid of child trafficking. Then he wanted to get rid of the income tax, and he had the Grace Commission formed, and they studied the income tax so they would have ammunition to put through legislation about that. Well, the bankers didn't want that. That's where they made their money. Still is, by the way. They're into everything. You name it. It's illegal. They're doing it. And they're offering things, as one fellow said, they're offering things to people that have no intrinsic value. Drugs have no intrinsic value. Pornography has no intrinsic value. Even diamonds have no intrinsic value. Well, until they started to use them in drill bits but a fancy diamond, anything, booze has no intrinsic value. Anything that they could sell, the bankers can sell, that doesn't give you anything for your bargain, as our common law says, an aleatory contract. Gambling, here's another one. A contract to gamble provides no intrinsic value. Well, what if I win $1 million? Well, it's a fortuitous contract. It doesn't depend upon at all upon hard work. It depends upon only chance. Well, I know that success depends upon chance, but also you have to add other things to it. But with a gambling contract, you don't have to add anything to it. It's just pure, unadulterated stupidity. It's an aleatory contract. That's why those things have been against the law all over. A maze going through the backside of Terre Haute, Indiana. No kidding. I didn't know this thing was there. I saw the billboard for it, and I saw on the edge of town, they built this, whoever they are, the mob, built this, or maybe it was the government, I don't know, built this giant casino and resort. Looks just like the stuff I see in Reno and Vegas. Yeah. And the parking lot's full all the time. I didn't know you could gamble there. I don't know what happened. I mean, take all that out of Nevada. Well, they got it everywhere else. Of course, I'm sure Nevada's ticked off about that. Well, the president. See, what we do now is we've declared who the president will be. This is written in 1828, long before, and so we didn't have a clear. We'd have to say, well, the Congress would have to choose who would be president if the president and the vice president are both gone. That's why it's smart not to put the president and the vice president in the same aircraft at the same time. If you lost both of them, then who's in charge? Well, our Constitution by amendment now tells us who will be president. Who is it? If both the president and the vice president cannot perform the duties of president because they're dead, they've resigned, they've suffered a stroke, or they're insane, or whatever, who's president? What does our Constitution now say with this amendment? The Speaker of the House of Representatives. Things got so crazy when Clinton was president. They're trying to get rid of him. It got important to everybody to think that to have it in place and have everything ready to go, that Newt Gingrich would be president of the United States. Why? Because he was the Speaker of the House of Representatives. He's now, according to our Constitution, he's third in line to be president of the United States. Because things were so crazy and volatile and unpredictable during the Clinton administration, he was just having fun. He didn't know what was going on either. He did not know what was going on and didn't care. What did he want? The same thing Jack Kennedy wanted. He wanted sex and drugs. And he spent his time, when you do that, you cannot serve God. You cannot do your duty before God and be enthralled, that means enslaved, to fill in your lusts. It's not possible, according to the Bible. Oh, you may have episodes where you give in to temptation, but as a Christian man or woman, God will not let it dominate your life entirely, like it did those men. Men, that's a stretch. They weren't acting like men. Well, things got volatile, so people got concerned and said, Al Gore is insane. Well, this is what people were saying. He was vice president, see. Al Gore is insane. Obviously, Slick Willie's insane. We better be ready to put somebody in there in case these two fellas, for all their diddling around, get themselves killed. When you mess with other people's wives, that's what can happen to you. Don't tell me. That ain't true. No, that's a possibility, a strong one. And that's what he was doing. So they got to worrying about something happened to Newt Gingrich. And they said, this guy just driving to work at the House of Representatives by himself. No, he needs to have some bodyguards, and we need to have a driver for him, just in case something crazy happens. Somebody's got to be in there. That's the kind of things they were doing. Hey, this is Brent Allen Winters, commonlawyer.com, www.commonlawyer.com, coming at you from the remote hinterlands of the Wabash River Valley, where the hogs, the frogs, and the dogs keep up a racket all night long.